Okay, so you have a new startup idea. This is super exciting, but the question is, where do you start? Today, we're gonna cover literally the very first step you should take when you're starting your new company. Hey, my name is Blake, and today we're going to talk about what do you do when you first start with a new company idea. And I don't know about you, but I have like a bunch of different startup ideas, and the question is, what's the first step to go further in? So the first step that you should take is you really need to write down an overview of your startup. Some people call it like a startup canvas. Some people even, you could say it's a pitch deck, but it's not even quite a pitch deck. It really is just a written down one-page overview of what you want to have for your startup. So why do you start with an overview? One is it's going to help you gauge your passion. I don't know, I'm an optimist. I'm guessing you're probably an optimist if you're into startups. What happens is when you start writing out all the details of all the different facets of the business in a canvas, what ends up happening is you start to get a little bit bored sometimes, and that's maybe a sign of like maybe this isn't the business for you. Second, it's really helpful because it's going to equip you to tell the story to a lot of different people in a holistic and concise way. And it's really important for you to be able to do that as you meet potential teammates or founders or investors. You kind of need to have a succinct and clear way of describing it. Third is it does help you highlight a little bit of what you should do next. What I found was that once I actually write out an overview of the startup, it gets really clear of like, okay, I'm kind of stretching it. I don't fully understand one element of it, and it kind of helps me direct with my intuition of what I should work on next. So without further ado, let me show you how we're going to do it. So, okay, start with just a blank sheet of paper. I'm going to use this little piece of wood to draw out some lines. So I do about a third line, and then I'll do another that's around a third. All right, so I got my thirds. The first section I'm going to cut in half. So one line down the middle. And then this guy, you're going to cut these into quadrants down here. So in total, that should equal up to 10 little squares. Whew. Did it. That's good. And so now you just go through 10 different questions. First off, I think what I find to be one of the most important pieces is what's the story, right? And so I write up here, okay, what is the story here? And what do I mean by story? What I mean is like, why do I even care about this problem? Why do I even care about doing this startup? It's important to write that down because what happens is if you start doing this exercise with more than one idea, you start to get a comparison of like, whoa, I'm more passionate about this. And 5 years from now, when you're about to run out of money and you're trying to, pitch to get investment to save the company to make payroll next month, that passion's kind of the only thing that you're going to have left. And so it's really important to measure like, how much do I care about this thing? Second, is it also with your story, it's like, am I really a good match for this? And you can start to see like, whoa, I have a lot of expertise in this area. And so it's helpful to kind of like capture, why am I a good fit for this thing? And lastly, I like to think of like, what would make this meaningful? What would be a meaningful outcome here? Is this just about making money? Or is it maybe like, oh, I think if I could change this many people's lives, this would be really meaningful. This is where I start. I'm not sure if everybody starts there, but it's really helpful for me to say, okay, with this startup, why do I care about this? And why am I a good match for this personally? And then finally, what would make it meaningful? Okay, so we got our story. So next up, now we're gonna start getting more into the business understanding, which is we gotta talk about the problem, right? So what's the problem that you're trying to solve? And also with that, who has this problem? And the more specific you can get, the better. I like to give the person an age and a name and a gender and say, this specific person has this problem. And then you kind of can describe succinctly what the problem is. And a couple attributes I like to look for in what makes a good problem to solve. Is it big? And / is it growing? Because that's pretty important. If it's big and growing, even if you do a crappy job, just because it's growing, you're going to grow with it. So it actually makes it's a much better company to start in a growing market. Next, is it frequent? Does the person have this problem often? If it's once every 5 years, this person has this problem, that's a really hard business to start. Because you can only target them once every 5 years, as opposed to if you're solving a problem that's literally happening every other hour in someone's life, they're going to be willing to pay a lot more money for it. Next is it urgent? / is it maybe even mandatory? Like the government is requiring that somebody solve this problem. That's a great problem to solve because they can't get outside of it. Or like, it feels urgent. Some people talk about this being like Vicodin versus being like a vitamin. You don't want to be in a vitamin business because it's not urgent that you take your vitamin C every day. However, if you've just had surgery, Vicodin is really, really important to have. It's urgent. And so those are better businesses. And then last, is the problem expensive? that obviously is going to be an easier business to build because people are already willing to pay a lot of money for it. So that's the problem side. To actually fill this out, some of it you can do with your intuition, but then other parts you actually need to maybe talk to some potential customers, and it's kind of a fun exercise to do that and explore a little bit. All right, so we did our story, did our problem. Next up, what is the solution? So with this solution, there are a lot of different formulas that people use to concisely describe the solution that your startup is providing. Some people call it a unique value proposition. How are you uniquely bringing value and proposing it to a customer? A good formula for a solution, maybe like use a superlative, a descriptor word, like the easiest, right? So you start with your superlative, and then next you're gonna use like a label. So what is the product? And you could be like the easiest finance software, right? You know, and so that's more like the what. And then last is the qualifiers. And it's like, you know, who should choose this product, right? So you could do like the easiest finance software for YouTube influencers, right? And so that's about the who. So we use that as a qualifier. Next up, we talk about why now? And this is especially important if there's a global conversation happening, like right now. Right now, we're in the summer of 2020. And so with that, obviously, there's a lot of global conversations. If you can tie your business idea to like why this can grow in this current environment, it makes it way more exciting and compelling. And I think it can convince you like, oh, now is the time to do this. So I like to ask the question when I'm doing why now, it's what's changed? You know, and with a business idea, I like to say like, okay, what's different now? And why is this the moment that we should enter into this? All right, so then after why now, how big could this get? Two different ways of kind of addressing this question of how big it could get is one is you can just start at first principles. And so with first principles, you like to say like, okay, well, you know, if we're saying it's the easiest finance software for YouTube influencers, it's like, well, how many YouTube influencers are there? And how much money are they spending on finance software? And from there, you can build up of like, oh, wow, if I had everybody, that would be $1 billion or something like that, right? And like you can kind of, from the bottom up, build out how big it could be. Another way to look at it too is to talk about like from a big picture standpoint. Maybe look at who's the biggest industry leader or maybe even a comparison industry and say, okay, you know, this other competitor built a business that was this big, and so I can imagine that I could do the same thing. Dream a little bit of how big it could be using analogies. So one is first principles, the other would be like analogies or comparisons. Yeah, and so normally at this stage, I'm gonna be Googling around. How many, you know, census records, how many people are this age with this type of business or whatever, you know, if you're evaluating idea. You have to kind of tie it to the problem statement that you had before and then try to quantify it in some way, shape, or form. Next up, which features matter most at day one? I meet with maybe, I don't know, 5 to 10 startup founders a week. And what I found is this is one of the early mistakes a lot of us make, and I even made for sure, especially my last one, and who knows, maybe I'm even making it now, but we tend to love to add features when we're pitching. We love to add features, be like, and then this will happen. And then once that happens, then this is gonna happen. And it gets bigger and bigger. And the problem is that everything works once things start working. Everything works at scale. But the question is, what are the minimum features necessary that will directly solve that problem that we were talking about before? I like to just literally list out feature 1, feature 2, feature 3. This is what we're going to provide. So I think it's really helpful just to try to keep that as minimal as possible and say, is this enough? Even if we can kill 1 or 2 of those things and really narrow it down, it's gonna give you clarity. Next up, oh, this is a great one. Who is on my team? Now this isn't just about like employees, this is also like partners. So it's like obviously employees. Is there somebody who can fill in your gaps? Someone who's like uniquely, would create an unfair advantage for your startup, right? So there's employees, there's partners. You know, do you happen to know somebody who runs a business that could be just the perfect match to work with you on this business? Even like key investors or, you know, people that you know, or anything that we can say of like, whoa, we're building together. It's not just me with an idea, it's a coalition of people with expertise. And so you kind of map out, okay, well, you know, how good is this team, right? Then obviously the next big one is gonna be, how do we make money? How does this work? And you don't have to build out a massive financial model at this stage. What you really need to know is like, first off, who pays, right? You do need to know who's the customer, who's paying you money. Also, we need to know how much, right? And how often. And then also, if they're paying you for something, how much does it cost to make the thing that they're paying for, right? If it's a product that's physical, you have to ask the question of like, what's one of those physical products cost? And then the other cost is how much is it going to cost to market, to sell this thing? Do you need salespeople? Do you need Facebook ads? Like what is it? What am I going to have to spend? So there's kind of like two. It's like who pays you and how much do they pay you, and then how much does it cost to make a single widget, and then how much is it going to cost to market that thing. And from there, you start to kind of get an idea of like, okay, I can imagine making some sort of profit in this process, because you want to make sure that the part about paying is bigger than the part about how much it costs to make the thing. Next up, who else is doing this thing? This is about competition, right? And I like what Peter Thiel says is that competition is for losers, which is you want to try to carve out a nice little space where no one's doing exactly the way you're doing it. So what you do is you typically will list out the alternatives that people currently are using in the market that you're looking at right now. You know, who are the big players in the space? And when you Google the problem that you have, who pops up, right? And so you want to list those things out. And then from there, you got to figure out, okay, how do I make sure that I'm not competing head to head with them? Can I maybe they're really expensive. So it's like, maybe I could just be the cheaper version of that. Or maybe they don't have very good customer service. So you could have better customer service. Or maybe it's like their product sucks and you're like, I'm gonna make a way better product and this is exactly how. So that's called, it's like what type of leader you wanna be. So it's like, do you wanna be product leader, price leader, or customer service leader? And it's good to kind of know which of those you're gonna do to try to beat them. The other area too would be focus, right? And so in terms of what are you gonna focus on, maybe the competitors are focusing on a specific geography or only one specific feature. And so what you could do is you could focus instead on being the one-stop shop, or you could focus on a different geography. But it's a way of, by saying, I'm gonna be the price leader in the Midwest, suddenly you're like, oh, nobody's really going after that. This kind of provides a way for you to have space so that you can create without feeling like you're getting squashed by the incumbent. And then finally, after you do all of this, it's gonna start popping out to you, what should I do next? Which is, you're going to look at this and be like, okay, looking at all these different pieces, I don't really understand who my team's going to be. That box is not very strong. Perfect. Now you have a to-do list item, right? You can say, find a team. And guess what you're going to do when you take meetings to meet with different engineers, or you're thinking about maybe I could partner with them. You're going to bring this sheet of paper and you're going to talk through it and say, hey, here's my story. Here's the problem I'm trying to solve, the solution we're building. Here's why now and how big it could get. Here are the features that I think really matter at the first. Here's who I'm thinking from a team standpoint, and here's how it's going to make money. And this is the marketscape. Here's the competition, and this is how we're going to kind of create a space for ourselves, right? Suddenly, that sounds like somebody who's got their stuff together, and like you have a clear plan, and you can invite people into it. Maybe another question that you might have is like, do I really know which features, right? I don't know. This box feels really bad. I don't feel like I really know which features are most important. Perfect. Reach out to literally just 5 potential customers. If you talk to 5 people about an idea, you're gonna walk them through the same exact story, and once you talk to them and ask them, what would you like to see in this software, this solution, what you're gonna find is that you're gonna get, you'll suddenly have a prioritized list coming out of it that then you can fill out. So what I like about this is it's kind of a springboard into doing the next thing. So this is it. I hope you found this helpful. What I'll do is I'll link here on the YouTube video to, if you go to allsmith.org, you can download, I have a template that I just did in the Google Doc, and so you can download a version of this, and then you'll be able to fill it out yourself, which would be good. And then I think I'll probably do another video after this using an example. Maybe I'll use boilerplate.legal, which is the new company that we're working on. I'll use an example. I actually have the document that I filled out, and I'll just talk you through it. And I think that pairing the principles that we just went through with a tangible example would probably be helpful. So that's about it. Subscribe if you want to learn more stuff. I'm really trying to make videos for startup founders outside of Silicon Valley, people who are really just trying to build and grow a business. Hope you found this helpful. Thanks a lot for watching.